Hi everyone. So this is a little bit of a different post today for Teen Transformation. And what I'm talking about today is tarot as a tool of divination or tarot as a tool of self-guidance. So hi everyone, this is Alex from Teen Transformation, and I'm looking forward to spending a few minutes chatting with you about tarot and how we can use it. So tarot is not always a tool that we use for divination or seeing into the future or looking at probabilities for ourselves going into the future. It can also be used as a tool for self-guidance. Now, why would we want to do that? So even if you don't believe in psychic abilities, you don't have to. But if you don't, but you are caught up in the busyness of everyday life, kids, work, cars, wages, how do I pay my bills, all of that kind of busyness that we get involved in, sometimes our personal growth and our ability to just be mindful of certain qualities and characteristics that we want to cultivate in our lives can get lost in all of that. So that having been said, what I wanted to talk to you today about was how we could use tarot as a method of self-guidance. Because certainly if you tune into the other videos here on Teen Transformation, you'll see how I use it as a method of divination. And that divination aspect does come out more in personal readings. Because if you're a psychic like I am, what I'm doing is reading the energy that is surrounding you as you come into the reading. So let's just talk a little bit about some of the cards. And I pulled 4 cards so we could just talk about what they mean and how you might use them. So the first card that I have is the Ace of Swords. So there's a couple of things about that. So a little bit of numerology. Ones are always new beginnings. So we know that because we're in a 1 year. 2017 is a 1 year. And also, so aces mean new beginnings, something that's new and about to happen. And if it's reversed, which sometimes they can, so you know it's reversed, it means, generally speaking, that it's not in the real world yet. So you could be thinking about, well, if I'm starting a new endeavor or I'm starting a new function or a new process or project, and I'm in the beginning stages of that, it may not be in our real world. It may still be living in our inner world. And so you'll hear people, New Age, you talk about the inner planes and all that kind of stuff. What it means is that we're working just on our mental, emotional ability to move forward in a very specific direction. Now, the other thing about swords as a general rule is because they're swords, just going to hold them up here again, because we look at swords, they have an edge, we use them to cut things. So swords oftentimes look like they're going to be difficult cards or negative cards, but not really. They're cutting through bullshit is basically what they're doing. So I'll be polite about it, call it BS, but it's cutting through stuff that doesn't serve us anymore. It's severing ties. And in that respect, the swords cards almost propel us into a new future. They cut our ties. They make us grow because we're being forced almost to do something new with our lives. So if you're using tarot as a self guidance kind of tool, if a sword comes up, then you want to be looking at what doesn't serve you. What do you need to cut ties with? Because those ties are holding you back. They're dragging you down. So if you want to move forward, you need to do some cutting out. Now, depending on the context that they're in, if you're using a number of cards at once, you want to take a look at the overall picture. But if you were using like 1 card a day as a mindfulness thing, then if you got the Ace, you might be looking at new beginnings and what is it that you're going to have to leave behind in order to move forward. So that's one way you could use it as self-guidance. Now, the next card is the 4 of Rods. And this is the Four of Rods. And so rods, or in some of the other decks they're called wands. This is the Aquarian Tarot deck. This is the deck that I've been using for 30 years. And so this card represents, this is all things creative and artistic. And when I say creative, I don't necessarily mean that it's like art. So you're not a painter or a singer, a musician, an actor, that kind of thing. I mean, we can be really creative about how we live in our day-to-day lives. We can be really creative about budgeting. We can be really creative about how we're raising our children. But that's what these cards speak to, is the creative sections of our lives. And so that's one aspect that we can take a look at. Now, what's really interesting about this card is, if you'll notice the way these 4 cards are set up, they look like a wedding canopy. So oftentimes this card's going to come up in relationship, and you see this home way off in the back here. So it's a card that's saying we're going to move forward, and it's a card that may be involved in love and relationship and creativity and all of that sort of thing. So again, a really interesting card to take a look at in terms of self-guidance. If you have that come up, you might start looking at where are the creative aspects of your life. And now this one is an interesting card, and I often have this card show up in relationship readings. It's the Five of Cups. And cups are usually joyful, bountiful, prosperous, but really just kind of, I would say, the happy cards. This card often comes up in relationships because you'll see there's 5 cards. I mean, it's the Five of Cups, and there's 2 here that are upright, and this person's back is turned to them, and then there's 3 here on the ground that have obviously spilt all their contents out. So this card really speaks to, don't look to the past unless that's the direction you're going in. And do we really want to go there? In relationship, it always comes up because people have regrets about relationships that they were in. And so you have to ask yourself, you know, are you focused on moving forward, or are you focused on moving backwards? And so that's what that card very specifically is asking us to look at. And, you know, past relationships that didn't work out, hey, we all have our regrets, but there's a time to just let it go and move on. So when you see that card come up in terms of self-guidance, it's asking you to, you know, look forward. Is that where you want to go? Because if you really want to look backwards, then, well, maybe you should do that. But don't expect much really good stuff to happen, because it's not in your past. That's over and done with and finished. And then the last card that we have is Pentacles. This one's the Ten of Pentacles. And Pentacles usually are everything to do with business, excuse me, entrepreneurship, even nitty-gritty things like contracts, but it's basically money cards and everything to do with money, business, earnings, savings, all of that kind of stuff. And so this one is talking about a prosperous future. There's a family here that's looking at a home. They're in an archway. So, you know, we're sort of looking at moving forward into the future with the family. At its base, that's what we're looking at. But you can use those cards in terms of a general overall reading for a month or a week, where we're not talking about very specific divination kinds of a divination context. We're talking about cards most often when we do readings for a month. So when you see my May reading, what I'm looking at in those readings is self-guidance and moving forward, those principles that we can embody in our daily lives in order to move forward in where we're going into our future. And it really is an issue of being mindful. So we might have a daily overall principle that we're going to try and embody that day. It's way too easy to get, you know, to say, oh, I'm going to work on kindness today, and then find yourself raging at the guy who's making a left-hand turn from the right-hand lane, or, you know, whatever it is. So we can use tarot in that respect as a way to call our attention back to what it is that we need to do. Many years ago, I met the author of a book, I guess it must be 30 years ago. The book was called The Peter Pan Syndrome, and he wrote an accompanying book called The Wendy Dilemma. And we were having dinner one night, and we were just talking about personal growth and how we go about doing that. And he said that in all his years of work, and he's a sociologist, I think that's what he was, a sociologist, was that the most important thing that he had learned and what he really wanted to convey to people was that the simplest thing you could do with your life would be to pay attention, pay attention, pay attention. Now that's different than overanalyzing everything, because trust me, you can overanalyze the hell out of any situation, and guess what? You don't get a lot of forward movement out of overanalysis. But, so that's what I wanted to talk to you about today is that the difference between self-guidance and divination. If you're going to book an appointment with me for a reading, I am going to bring in that divination aspect. I am going to take a look at the energy that's surrounding you. The other thing that I think is really important when you're using tarot is we can have lofty ideas, but at the end of the day, you really need practical, everyday activities, functions, guidance, just to get through the day. So we can do that sort of thing. And when you're in a reading with me, it's not just like, oh yes, he's really in love with you. He's going to come back to you. He's going to whatever, whatever, whatever. It's like, if you're going to move forward in a relationship, sometimes you have to have some strategies to keep you on track and to keep you from squeezing the hell out of something that's happening in a new way in your life. Sometimes we get really anxious about what it is that's coming for us or where we're moving in our future. At my age, which is getting up there, I would really just advise people, it's like, take a couple of deep breaths and relax. Essentially, it's all going to work out. It's not all going to go to hell in a handcart tomorrow, unless you've been acting and planning to do that for about 6 months. But generally speaking, life will work out, and it isn't going to happen overnight. There isn't a sort of universal McDonald's food ordering window out there that you can just drive up to and say, I'll have an order of happily ever after. We do have to work at it. The thing is where are we going to spend our time and what are we going to focus on? So that's all I wanted to say today. I know I've probably gone on way over, but that's one of the things that we can take a look at is self-guidance / divination. How are we going to use tarot to become the authentic human beings that we want to be, and to participate in our communities in a way that moves forward, and to practice mindfulness and kindness and compassion every day. They're not easy things to do, but we might as well start today, because tomorrow's going to come anyways, no matter what we do. So anyways, that's the way it is. Thanks so much, T in Transformation.